Hello and welcome to Neography A to Z. On this channel, I take an analytical approach to reviewing the functionality of invented writing systems. That is, writing systems that were explicitly created, engineered, or invented for a constructed language, or to be used in place of an already existing system. I also review these systems for their aesthetic appeal in a less analytical way, but relying on decades of in-depth study and work in the field. This episode will focus on reviewing the Romulan script, developed by Trent Pearson for the show Star Trek Picard. The accompanying language has been used in multiple other shows, but information is sparse. Fortunately, Trent participated in the quote-unquote Conlang Adventure earlier this year. A few clips from that virtual event are included in this review. Trent is well known to the older Conlang community as his page on Idrani has been up for quite a long while. His work on the Romulan script is not surprising, as he has demonstrated an admiration for this style of script and emulated it in his own works. On the left here we see Aha, his Romulan version script. The artistry of this script is interesting, even if it is based on previous designs seen in Star Trek media. The Romulans, as a species, go back to the original series, but the language was only fragmentary until Trent was hired to recreate it, and he did so by including and incorporating those pre-existing fragments. The original script, on the right of the screen, first appeared in the Next Generation series episode Face of the Enemy, aired February of 1993. It was, like the majority of scripts in Star Trek canon, only set dressing until Trent was hired. Now we'll take a look at functionality. On March 22nd and 23rd of 2025, William and Yvonne Morton hosted the Conlang Adventure 2025 in a Zoom conference. Trent Pearson was a guest speaker, and he explained the Romulan script that he created. So let's hear him explain the functionality.
Okay, so in the first section, I'm just going to go over the Latinization. The Latinization was developed to make reading Romulan simpler for actors and artists, scriptwriters and scenic artists, and it just assigns Latin letters or digraphs to the phonemes of the language. So you'll notice that in this chart, some of the glyphs that are large, that are the Latinized glyphs, have more than one phone below them. And that's because I'm trying to just sort of give a shorthand way of showing some allophonic variation. So these Latinized glyphs will make any and all of the sounds that are below them, depending on the environment. And I'm not going to go over that in this presentation, but it's just important to understand that that's the case. The DH glyph is archaic. That doesn't that's not used a lot in Romulan. That's old. And to be honest, this came from having to back engineer something that a writer did with a name. So we had to add this in, even though there was nothing else in the language that really used it. And I had to go backward in time and create some words that had this archaic glyph and sound in them, even though they weren't part of what I originally created. So whenever you see Romanized or Latinized, however you want to say it, Romulan, this is the system that we use. And this sort of became the de facto alphabetical order of Romulan. It's actually really just English alphabetical order, but it's the voiceless and voiced consonants and then the rest of the consonants after that. And they're just paired, if that makes any sense. So that's the Latinization that we used. If you scroll down to the next section, so Menfar is the native word that means Romulan, and it can be used as both a noun and an adjective. There are two forms of writing. One form is abjatic, And it's not a pure abjad, but the purpose of this writing is to be practical. So the way it basically works is that every syllable has to be written with only two glyphs. If the syllable begins and ends with consonants, so the onset and the coda are both consonants, those will be the two glyphs that are chosen for writing that syllable. If the syllable does not have a consonantal coda, then an abbreviated vowel that you can see at the bottom of this chart, it may not be showing completely on your screen, I can't tell, but will be used only in that case. If there are any syllables that end in a diphthong, only the last sound of the diphthong will be represented by the vowel. And there are some allowed consonant blends that can fill both the onset or the coda space. In that case, it would be only the first consonant of the onset or the last consonant of the coda that would be used to write it. So in all cases, you are writing only two glyphs per syllable. You'll notice too that there is a null consonant, looks kind of like an H there in the chart. That's for any syllable that does not have an onset consonant. So this is the abjadic form, and this would be used in places where there's high demand for practicality, like a military vessel, in business, in trade, so forth. So all the sounds are represented with these glyphs, and a lot of these glyphs have a remnant of something that Monty Thrasher created. So this is a little bit of a tip of the hat to him. And if you look closely, so like for example, if you look at B, it sort of looks like just a horizontally flipped B. And T looks very much like a T. And F looks sort of like an F that's been rotated 180 degrees. Does that make sense? So some of those are left over from Monty Thrasher's work, and they can be a good mnemonic to help you remember the phonemes of these glyphs. Okay, if we go down to the next section. So this is traditional Menfar, and this is where more of the aesthetic of my own conlanging comes into play. So with this set of glyphs, full syllables are represented, and each syllable is written in a vertical block that has the onset at the top, nucleus at the middle, coda at the bottom. So you have a larger upper and a smaller lower form. And you'll notice too that for any of the consonants that have an extender, like B and F and K, they will have a 180-degree rotation when they're on the bottom, so that the extender becomes a descender instead. And these are written in syllabic blocks from left to right with spaces between words. Again, you can see there is a null onset for to fill the onset position in syllables that have no initial onset, but you never write a null glyph in the coda position. If there's no coda, you simply don't put anything in the lower position. You can also see that there are vowel symbols for all four of the cardinal vowels, as well as independent ones for all of the diphthongs. The cardinal ones are exactly like the cardinal vowels in my AHA script. They're pretty much identical. The diphthongs are not. Their assignments are different, and some of them have slightly different forms. The vowel on the end, that is actually specifically for making certain consonants into complete syllables. So it will either make them ejective, which is what the glottal stop actually represents, or it will add schwa to them and they'll become their own syllable. But to the Romulan mind, that's the same thing. That's the same sound, so to speak. That's one phoneme. And that's important. There are several important grammatical components that utilize that, and so it's important to understand what that is. Now, these forms are based off of a whole backstory, which I'm afraid I can't share it with you right now because of NDA, but they stem from a tradition of calligraphy and from a historical backstory within the Romulan world story that make them hard to write unless you're using calligraphy instruments and special equipment. So if you scroll down to the next set, this is how you would write them by hand or with a stylus where you have just a simple point, so like a pencil, a ballpoint pen, or something like that, some kind of stylus. So you can see how these are somewhat similar, and they give the same effect as those calligraphic forms do, but they're much simpler and they're very much easier to write if you have just a pencil or something like that. So these can be written. This is obviously the traditional set, but if you wanted to write by hand and abjadically, you would write them like the upper glyphs here, only they're slightly taller than this. So they should basically be square. And when you're writing the abjadic glyphs, any glyph that has an ascender, so like B or F or K, that's still, even with the ascender, it still fills the square space. So the little ascender fills. The ascender fills about a third of the vertical space, and then the rest of it fills 2/3, if that makes sense. And you would only write abbreviated versions of the vowels, which I'm afraid I didn't include in this document, but this allows you to do some handwriting.
Here are a few samples of both Minfar scripts for the sake of comparison. As you can see, though they are stylistically very similar, they do function differently enough that reading and learning them would be noticeably contrasted. The handwritten mode of Minfar is interesting in that it seems likely that this format would simplify even more than what we already see on screen. Now we'll go over the aesthetics. Multiple props and pieces used in the Star Trek Picard series feature the Romulan script that Trent made. The value of a working writing system in a complex narrative cannot be understated. Much of the story is enhanced and becomes more impactful when interlaced with artifacts and props that help explain the quote-unquote alien culture. The image above is a technical readout on a Romulan spacecraft. The lower image is a sign on a building written in both English and Romulan. I don't think it needed the English, but I also realize that they want the audience to know what they're looking at. The number of Romulan items used in production for Star Trek Picard is extremely impressive and speaks to Trent's contribution and creativity. This is what having a fully fleshed out conlang can do for a show. It can give it a depth and realism that random sounds and symbols simply cannot provide. Trent's artistry brings a level of realism and cultural identity to the Romulans that species such as the Ferengi or Jem'Hadar or even the Klingons simply lack. Due to how recent Trent's version of the script is, there are no available images of anyone with a tattoo representing his script. However, on the left, here we see that a set dressing script is alive and well in this tattoo featuring the emblem of the Romulan Star Empire. On the right is a more recent version of the Romulan emblem. There are a multitude of Romulan-related products online, from costumes to posters, mugs, and models, but none of them currently feature Trent's creation. Who the heck knows why? But it's most likely due to the newness of it, or the studio holding on tight to the trademark for some unknown reason. Regardless, I would imagine there is quite a big market for such things. The range of applications with a script such as Trent's are obvious when the technical Romulan readouts are seen in contrast to the artifacts created for the show. It's truly great work when a script maintains its aesthetics in various mediums. This script definitely accomplishes that goal. While the script was expressly commissioned for the Star Trek Picard show, Trent has also created his own artifacts using his version of the script. I'll let him explain.
And I did. So this is a copy. I'm sorry I have to do it this way, like I'm reading you a book in first grade, but this is a copy of the scroll done by hand, so using calligraphy. This is one of the leaves in the scroll, and then I converted that into a digital format. And these Romulan books can be either read like a codex, or they can be fully pulled out like a regular scroll. But so this has the this has the same story, but this is a digital form that I've gone through and taken all the hand copied parts and turned it into a digital one that could be published, really, if they wanted to. That tells the story of the split from Vulcan. So that one goes on and on. And then when the story of the Koat Milat was brought up, and there was a particular showrunner who had a lot of involvement in that, and he was very interested in that. He made it clear that in Romulan culture, the Koat Milat were unique because they were in direct opposition to a deeply held cultural schema that was held by the majority of Romulans, which is geared around ideas of layers and secrecy and codes and masks and disguises and so forth. So the Koat Milat believe in absolute honesty and transparency all the time. But most Romulans don't. That was this showrunner's instructions for me. So I figured that most Romulans would be subject to a dogma that indoctrinates those ideas of secrecy and layers and so forth. So I came up with a mantra, and this mantra is also encapsulated in a scroll that people would have in their homes, and that they would periodically read this mantra to their children, and as adults would read it, and would be almost like some kind of scripture or dogma. So I made these two scrolls. This is the first one that I made, and this just rests. This would just sit on a table or a hearth or something, and this says the heart of the Romulan, or the Romulan heart. And inside this, you can take the top off and remove the scroll. And then the scroll contains the mantra. So I did this one by hand too. This is hand calligraphy. So I think it would be pretty easy to produce these two and have this be sort of a Romulan artifact that fans could have. that it could be reproduced in several forms, not as complex as this, but it could be done. Then here's another version that I did. This one's using the traditional writing on the plaque, says the same thing, Romulan heart. And then this case can actually come out of the cradle. And then this one I just did a slightly different format where the scroll has 2 lines instead of 1. So this is a sample of the traditional writing too, with a little bit of decoration.
Anyone that enjoys Trent's work should definitely look at his Idrani website. He has work on around 4 dozen different types of scripts spanning decades. Although, during his interview at the Conlang Adventure previously mentioned, he admitted that it's been several years since he's made any updates to that site, so take all of the information with a huge grain of very old salt. A link to his site is in the description of this video. I rate Trent's Romulan script 4 out of 5 for functionality and 4 out of 5 for aesthetics. Trent's work is perhaps in the elite category of modern neographies. He devotes himself to the crafting of functional and beautiful systems that, when compared to many others, simply cannot be matched. His focus on the artistic side of scripting means that he can produce real-world artifacts that imbue the viewer with a sense of the language and especially the culture of that artifact. I genuinely envy his talent. Those are my thoughts on Trent's Romulan script. I'm interested in hearing what you have to say, maybe even about his Idrani work. Next time, we will be discussing the Xi'an system for the Star Citizen video game, created by Britton Watkins, so be sure to click the bell button to be notified when the next episode is posted. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. I very much appreciate your time and thank you for watching. As a note, all relevant links used in the making of this video are in the description. All information is the property of its creators and is openly available online.